Hey guys, Ruckus Gaming here, coming at you with another episode of Tuesday Tips and Tricks. Today is the last installment of our Boss Energy Relic series, and today we're going to talk about Philosopher's Stone. This relic gives you 1 free energy every turn for the indirect cost of benefiting your enemies by granting them 1 strength in each combat. This energy relic is a little bit different from others because I think while many energy relics some newer players may want to actively avoid when they first see them because the cost seems very high, such as no more resting, no more potions, etc. This cost is deceivingly low in that you look at it and you may think only 1 more strength is a very small trade or a very small cost to gain 1 more energy. When you get attacked and you're only taking 1 more damage, that doesn't seem like a very big deal. But to understand why this relic can be so intimidating and many more experienced players are very discouraged from choosing this is because of multi-attack enemies. Let's take a quick look at some Act 2 and 3 enemies that really like Philosopher's Stone and will punish you for picking it. Here are the Act 2 enemies, and the common joke about Philosopher's Stone, if you get it at the end of Act 1, is that this is a bird's summoning stone. These guys are going to really punish you for taking this right away. Many times you will see them on the very next floor, and you'll immediately think, why did I ever take this? Other enemies that multi-attack in Act 2 include Chosen, the Avocado, the Baseball, Spire Growth, Snecko, and then you have Book of Stabbing, Gremlin Leader, Bronze Automaton, and the Champ. Then in Act 3, you're going to see enemies like Darklings, the Maw, the Entangled Mass, Baseball again, as well as Nemesis, Reptomancer, and all 3 Act 3 bosses. And of course, this goes without saying, Act 4, Shield and Spear, and the Heart, of course, have very devastating multi-attacks. Those are the biggest reasons why many experienced players might be a little more hesitant to pick this than newer players, just because we've all had runs ended very quickly by Philosopher's Stone, just because we couldn't handle the extra damage from all of these tough enemies. Generally speaking, you want to try to make your combats easier, especially the hardest combats easier. You're not very interested in making your hardest combats even harder. But you can make it work, and let me show you how. Here is the run history, and let's take a quick look at some of the MVP relics and cards. Giria was our Niao bonus, where I traded just a little bit of HP for a rare relic, and this was immediately very useful, especially with another early tool that I got. But as you can see from my run history, I took 4 fires in the first act, and at all 3 of these first 4 fires, I lifted and upgraded Giria, because with that extra strength, Watcher is going to be really powerful. I didn't go for the immediate eruption upgrade that I usually do, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. Runic Pyramid was my Act 1 boss reward, and this is one of my favorite Watcher picks. This helps to keep the cards in your hand so you can play them exactly when you need them. That's the number 1 problem in Slay the Spire, in my opinion, just having the right card at the right time, and Runic Pyramid is a great way to do that. During this run, it helped us a lot for getting big lethal hits when we needed them, so I was often sitting on my best attacks until the right moment to play them. Pen Nib was another very valuable relic for this run. When you've got Watcher already doubling her damage with Wrath, and then you've got Pen Nib doubling on top of that, that is incredibly powerful. This is essentially the same as something like using Burst on an upgraded Catalyst for Silent. It is just an instant kill. To double what you're already doubling 4 times attack power is very, very valuable, especially when you consider we've got Girya on our side. Singing Bowl was actually quite useful on this run as well. Because of the incredibly powerful attacks we were able to play, that means I didn't really need to pick up lots of extra cards. I could keep the deck pretty slim, not super slim, but pretty slim. And instead of just skipping cards and getting nothing, I could get max HP. Watcher doesn't really love to block. You don't really feel good taking lots of defending cards on Watcher. So another way to block, just use your HP. Now let's take a look at some of those MVP cards. Tantrum was a gift that I got on floor 3, and this combined with Girya is a very large reason why I was strongly incentivized to not upgrade, but to lift at the fires instead of upgrading that eruption immediately. Having a 1-cost Wrath card as well as a Wrath card that did a multiple attack style damage stacked with our strength and made our deck very powerful very early. Ragnarok was obviously going to be the win condition for this deck, especially when it lined up with Pen Nib. This was the card I would often sit on with Runic Dome. I would spend 1 or 2 turns just kind of quickly drawing through my deck until I found it, set it Pen Nib if possible, and then combat was over. Very, very simple. Wallop was another great card for us. It shined in several moments throughout the run. Those few times where I wasn't able to quite quickly kill turn 1 or turn 2, Wallop added some value, scaling with my strength, scaling with Wrath. It meant I could stay in Wrath longer. I didn't have to really dance quite so much as usual. I could just stay in Wrath and make sure that I got out of combat as quickly as possible. Now that we've taken a look at the cards and relics, let's see this deck in action. Our first Act 3 Elite is Reptomancer, and initially I start to try and kill these daggers, but with a Bowling Bash in hand, I think better of it. Try to keep them alive a little bit longer to see if I can get that off nice and big. Scroll helps me draw. And even though I don't really need to, I start setting up with my Mental Fortress. I thought this combat might last a little bit longer, but it was even stronger than I imagined. So I use Eruption on 1 dagger, and then with my Pen Nib, I see that Tantrum is actually going to hit for 168 damage by itself. Repto's dead. Our next Elite is Giant Head. This one is a little bit longer. I know that I want to play my best cards at the end of the turn. The only problem is the Ragnarok is so expensive, you're kind of forced to play it first. So I gotta be a little bit careful with how I set up here. The first turn, pretty easy. Now I know I want to use that Wallop last so I can get as much block out of it as possible. And it also means that I don't need to go out of Wrath. I can full block this 28 damage, no problem. And then next turn, I will be ready to go. Maybe even go into Calm if necessary. But with our Pen Nib on 9 and Ragnarok in hand, it's a very easy choice. Ragnarok almost does it, and Tantrum finishes. And our final Act 3 Elite was Nemesis. I spent a moment or two thinking if there was some way that I could possibly get this combat to end with my pen nib on 9, but decided that instead of doing all that, I'd rather just kill now. The Act 3 boss was Awakened One, and right away you can see why having lots of strength and wrath on the Watcher is so desirable. Start off with a quick little tantrum. Now I've got pen nib and wrath with the bowling bash and almost one-shot Awakened One. When you've got those damage modifiers on the Watcher, even basic attack commons can be super strong. Third eye, just for a little scry, so I would know that my next turn is a high quality turn, because I'm going to start taking damage. Now the Awakened One is back. I play Flurry of Blows. It came in handy quite a bit because of its small damage, which might sound interesting or counterintuitive. But sometimes with these big damage decks, when you've got an enemy that's low on HP, you don't really want to play a big attack. And you can see right there why Flurry of Blows was so handy. I could save my big attacks to do large, chunky damage on enemies. And when I just wanted to kill a little guy, Flurry of Blows fit in nicely. Very, very briefly considered YOLOing that Ragnarok, but I decided I'd rather just block, use Flurry of Blows again to kill that last cultist, and live to play another day. Now that we've got just Awakened One to worry about, I start going into it, play that crescendo for a really big Ragnarok. Not quite enough to kill, and neither is the wallop, so I decided to just scrawl, and why not finish with Tantrum, our MVP. Now we're going to take on Shield and Spear. The first turn is a little spooky of this fight. You're looking at quite a bit of damage, and I don't really have the greatest draw in the world. I don't have any wrath cards, I don't have any big attacks, so I know I just have to focus on blocking here. Of course, you always want to go in calm with the expectation next turn you will get a wrath card and you can get that extra energy. I very briefly consider this a potion, but after a moment of mental math, I realize I can actually full block just with my wallop and basic defend. Again, turn 2 is not the most amazing draw in the world, but I do see that scrawl. So the first thing I want to do is make some hand space so I can get a nice big draw here. I really want to use this Omniscience on Ragnarok, but even more, I want to go into Wrath first. If I play this Cut Through Fate, I may not be able to have the energy for that. So I decide to YOLO. Thankfully, I get a Wrath card. That puts me back over 4 energy again. And I want to make sure that not too many of those Ragnarok hits get split. So I'm going to work down Shield and Spear. Probably could have killed with the Tantrum there, actually. But regardless, I think doubling the Ragnarok at this point will be more than enough. So we Omniscience Ragnarok, and it is over. And finally, here we are at the Heart Fight. For the first turn, we get Omniscience, and I'm gonna immediately go and get that Mental Fortress. This is basically the only reason I felt like I needed Mental Fortress at all. Most of the other hallway fights and elite fights, even boss fights, were only 2 to 3 turns long, and I didn't really do lots of stance dancing. The wallop was enough to let me just stay in Wrath, but here I felt like we were really going to have to last a little bit longer because of the damage cap. And that mental fortress was just a little bit of extra block, so omnisciencing it was very nice. Pretty simple first turn. I'm holding onto that wallop instead of playing it for this exact reason. We've got the big attack coming in, and without any calm cards in hand, I decide that I'm just going to go into Wrath and play that wallop twice. I do as much damage as I can. Whenever you go into Wrath with Ragnarok in hand, it's always a good idea to play that. Wallop here for a decent amount of block, and then we're going to use one of those liquid memories. Very strong potion, especially when your deck revolves around just playing 2 or 3 key cards as often as possible. Still a spooky amount of damage to be taking here, but considering I have 2 of those liquid memories, I'm okay with it. Here I am going to switch out of my stance just because it is so much damage. Don't think the potion would do enough there for me. But once I am in calm, 24 more, or what is it now? Not 24, 12, but it has the pen nib, so it is 24. Brings me very close to full block. Play that defend and sit on this hand. Turn 4 is the Heart's buff turn, so I'm basically free to attack. Play that just for Beat of Death. Go into Wrath to do as much damage as possible. Now I'm trying to clear hand space. Probably should have played those strikes first if I'm being honest, but I was hoping to do as much damage as possible by drawing other higher damage cards. I really want to make sure that this guy is under 300, and a strike will do that. So as long as I can kill next turn, I don't really need to worry about the damage. I go into Divinity for maybe only the second time this entire run. I was killing so quickly, I just never had a chance to do it. Wallop for the block. Even those strikes are doing 30 damage each. Very, very large attacks. Tantrum gets it close, and Eruption for the kill. Now that we've seen this deck in action, let's take a look at some other relics and cards that could have been really helpful, even though we didn't see them this run. And if you have Philosopher Stone, maybe you should keep an eye out for these as well. Meal Ticket or other healing relics such as Eternal Feather or Pantograph would be very helpful when you're playing a deck that doesn't really block very much or often. When you can't block, the next best thing you can do is heal. Bottled Flame is not usually a very strong relic, but I think in a deck like this one it could have worked very well. Always having that Ragnarok in hand on turn 1, and then finding a way to get into Wrath is much easier. You could scrawl to get it, you could cut through Fates, or you could even just draw it in the opening hand by itself anyway. So Bottled Flame on Ragnarok would have been amazing. Bag of Preparation is a turn 1 relic that I'm always happy to have, and Gambling Chip would have been a great way to ensure that we always got Ragnarok into our hand with a Wrath card to start combat. Frozen Eye could have been very helpful for determining whether or not we wanted to draw with Cut Through Fate or Scrawl. That was something that I often ran into over the course of this run. Not knowing if I was going to get Wrath or not knowing if I could really go all out or not, just kind of having to YOLO and play it and see what happens. Frozen Eye makes those problems go away completely. And medical kit is always really nice to have, especially when you've got Runic Pyramid. You could see having a wound in the hand, having a slime or a void in the hand with that scrawl was very unwieldy. And if you've got the medical kit, you can just exhaust those and then scrawl your hand full of cards that you really want to have. Crush Joints is another really high quality Watcher common in my eyes. I love having a way to apply Vulnerable on my own. Not only does it boost damage from your Wrath, from your Ragnarok, etc., it's also just really good for getting rid of Artifact. We didn't rely on it this run, but Talk to the Hand is one of Watcher's main ways to get lots of block, especially when you're getting multi-attacks and multiple attacks per turn. However, the main drawback is that if the enemy has Artifact, it's not going to work unless you can find a way to get rid of those artifacts first. Watcher doesn't have a ton of that going for her, but you can get that from relics, or you can also possibly get those from colorless cards. Prey is one of my favorite mantra cards, especially when you've got a couple prostrates in the deck. With the Damaru relic, eventually we got there, but because of the strength of the deck, we often weren't really going into Divinity in most combats. Not that we needed to. But if we were missing a couple pieces, if we didn't have that Ragnarok, maybe we just want to boost the damage of our Bowling Bash or our Cut Through Fate, etc. Going into Divinity with Prey and 2 copies of Prostrate is very, very quick and can really boost your damage. Wreath Flame is not one of the more common Watcher cards to take, but I think when you're relying on Ragnarok and when you've got a Runic Pyramid that allows you to hold that Wreath of Flame and make sure that you get the proper draw order to play that combo and get the synergy really going, could have been very nice. And Vault would have been a great get out of jail free card. Being able to just say no thank you to end the turn and then draw another 5 cards is so powerful. Vault is basically like playing 3 energy to get 3 energy and then draw 5, as long as you have hand space. Coupled with Runic Pyramid, that would make combination plays where you're doing something like going into Wrath, then going into Ragnarok, or using Wreath of Flame if we had it into Ragnarok would be even simpler when you could stack 2 turns in a row. So that is it. Thank you guys for watching all the way to the end. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments either on this or perhaps a suggestion for something to do in the next What series, or even just a general Tuesday tips and tricks series, let me know. I do have some ideas though. I might go back into some ranking tiers, perhaps looking at commons versus uncommons versus rares over the course of a couple weeks for each character. So please leave a like, share, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. And as always, have a great day. Thanks for watching Ruckus Gaming.